All right, guys. Well, let's get it started. No. Never mind. I hear stuff on the radio, and it sticks. Comes out at inappropriate times. So, here's what I want to talk to you about first. Video research presentation. And it shows up on the syllabus as narrated PowerPoint. And I decided to change the name of this assignment, partly because I had found a number of students chose not to do this through PowerPoint. So let me go through this list here, and I have some examples to show you as well. And so, video research presentation due April 11th, 11:59. And part of that has to do with I have set aside on the syllabus April 12th, 17th, and 19th, 3 class periods. That's partly because this is a reasonably large class when everybody's here. I got close to 20. And the length of these should be 8 to 10 minutes. So, doing some simple arithmetic, set aside 3 class periods, don't know if we'll use them all. And you see, I have this due April 11th before we start doing that. But bottom line, when I get them in, I'll put them in order. We'll play them in class, and afterwards, after each presentation, each video presentation, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions, have a little Q&A session with the creator, the author of the video. And so, how can you submit these? As I said a moment ago, I had originally asked people to do this as PowerPoint presentations, but you can upload MP4, you can do a YouTube video, and you can send that to me, and sometimes just the YouTube address.
Right here, though.
What'd you say, Austin? What you got?
One tap. And casting one tap.
Oh, okay.
That's one tap. That's one shot. I'm dying.
YouTube video. And any other format. And this is what I ran into last fall, was that, especially with some of our international students,
Now they're getting caught by another team. We can fight them.
that
Wait.
that was something they were more familiar with and ended up with
Yeah,
the
it was all good.
product. But it just depends what kind of software you have. But as long as it's something that I can download and play on Google, because Google is the browser that I use, you should be using for Canvas too. It's the one that works best. That's what we're in right now, even though this is the Canvas website, it's on Google browser. And so anyway, the length 8 to 10 minutes, and your choice of artwork illustrated in the textbook. And so pretty much what we did with your research paper, why I reintroduced that back into this class, was to see if you could find the necessary information and that you were using the proper vocabulary to be able to do something like this. And obviously, this is another level up in terms of difficulty But your choice of artwork illustrated in the textbook, and I'm gonna let you do this. If you want to do the artwork you did your research paper on, I'm okay with that. You would have a lot of the research done. What you would still have to do is put this together. But your research paper would be a great start. But if you don't want to do that, you want to move on to something else, that's fine too, as long as it's in the textbook. And being an old educator, one of the things that I have tried to do over the years, it doesn't matter if it's if you're an art major or just taking this as a humanities credit or something, what I would like you to have out of this class, I hope you get a whole bunch out of this class, but I hope that when you're like old, like 30 or something, you know, that you got this artwork that you studied and researched and made a video presentation on in this class. You know, I do that too. I can talk, I really remember what I've learned in all of the classes that I ever took. And then, you know, there's always a special one. I have former students all over the place, and I have social media now, and they tell me about things like, well, you know, I never knew about Barbara Kruger until I had your class, and she's my favorite artist and stuff, you know. Something that you can own, something you'll carry with you for a long time. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping you get out of this. I'm hoping you get a lot more than that, but really I want you to know that. And so what will this PowerPoint video look like? Oh, I was going to tell you this too. I told you this MP4. If you do this as I had originally designed it on PowerPoint, I'll show you that in a little while, but PowerPoint has a little button up on the top menu that says record, little yet orange button, and you can narrate over your PowerPoint and it records your voice. And then just like normally you can click it, goes to the next slide. You can do some other settings like the transitions and stuff, have one slide melt into the other, and you know, all of that kind of cool stuff. But bottom line is that if you do that on PowerPoint and you record that presentation, when you save it, it turns that PowerPoint file into an MP4. That's the way it'll come out. And so when I say MP4, that's really the PowerPoint one, but a lot of other presentation software will also turn your presentation into an MP4. And basically, MP4s are what you end up putting on YouTube and so on. And so anyway, I want you to start out like this, the image of the artwork. Give us the title, the artist, the date of creation, the country, style, period, or movement. And so like if you were to talk about, say, Picasso, you would talk about Cubism. If you were to talk about Michelangelo, you would be talking about High Renaissance. So that's a style and it's a period. And this idea of a movement, movements are really only things that have happened in modernism. It's kind of like, how should I say this? As I've been telling you that artists, as we moved through the 19th century and into the 20th century, they kind of coalesced around particular ideas. And they were a group of artists. And that group would have been called a movement, and they had shared ideas and styles, but simultaneously, there may be 2 or 3 or a dozen movements all going on at the same time. Just because something's from, let's say, 1910, it could be Cubism, it could be Expressionism, it still could be Claude Monet and Impressionism, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, identify all of that and then give us the location. That is, if you have a piece of architecture or sculpture, the location or museum where the work can be found. Then I want you to do an analysis of content, subject matter, narrative, and I've been talking a lot about narrative this semester, and the narrative of, say, the Last Supper comes right out of the New Testament. Leonardo da Vinci, Last Supper, the narrative is about that Last Supper, Holy Thursday, the evening meal. Judas leaves early to sell out Christ for 30 pieces of silver, and some cultural context. Cultural context and is like, could be a lot of things. You could say the narrative of that Last Supper is the Last Supper, but if you talk about Leonardo da Vinci, you would have to talk about High Renaissance. And you could talk about how Da Vinci himself did a lot of experimentation with different kinds of paints and things like that. You could talk about the fact that this was painted on the wall of a monastery right above the entrance to the cafeteria, to the dining room where they ate. You could talk about, relate this back to the style, cultural context, could run right back here that the High Renaissance was a time when those Italian painters were perfecting the illusions of 3-dimensional space on a 2-dimensional surface. And you could talk about 1-point perspective. So cultural context and style, see, these all interact with each other. It's nothing exists in isolation, but I'm listing them out like this so that you don't miss something of vital importance. And then finally, your personal interpretation or reaction. It's relevant to your life, the emotional impact, influence on your artwork. And I know some of you are artists, and this may actually influence you in some sort of way, or your point of view. And so, let's see. Finally, a bibliography. And so this is 200 points. It's a big chunk of your grade this semester. And so, I have a couple of pretty good examples here. I got these from last semester, students who are actually here with us this semester. And last semester was the ancient part of this course. And so, without further ado, okay, let's pause this. And I gotta make sure I got the volume. It sounded kind of low. Okay,
Hello, my name is Emily, and for my presentation, I chose the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. I chose this.
yeah, Emma Slave. Oh. Okay, yeah, I get it. Oh, good job. And so, let me see if I can get some better volume on this.
Hello, my name is Emily, and for my presentation, I chose the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. I chose this for my presentation because of how Hatshepsut, the status of the pharaoh, and how intricate the temple is. I also wanted to do more research on embalming and Egyptian religion overall. The mortuary temple of Hatshepsut is a multi-level structure secured in the limestone cliffs behind the Nile Valley. Built in 1479 BC, the temple is situated on the cliffside of Deir el-Bahri in Lajor, Egypt. The purpose of the temple was to be used as a funerary temple for the pharaoh Hatshepsut, who ruled during the New Kingdom. Hatshepsut was the daughter of King Thutmose I, the third pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, who was known for his expansion of Egypt into Mumbai, which is now present-day Sudan, and Syria. Hatshepsut became queen of Egypt at the age of 12 after marrying her half-brother Thutmose II. Thutmose II died young, leaving the throne to his infant son Thutmose III, who was born from one of his secondary wives. This led to Hatshepsut becoming sort of regent for Thutmose III, and then 7 years later, she took the full title and power, becoming pharaoh and leading to Hatshepsut and Thutmose III becoming co-leaders. Throughout Hatshepsut's time as queen, she was always depicted with a very feminine figure and obvious female wardrobe and anatomy. The female pharaoh experiments with portraits that feature a male regalia and female body, but as she continued her reign, all of her portraits began to depict her as a full male. Through Hatshepsut's reign, her foreign policies focused on trade rather than war. Her reign was a very peaceful one. Building and restoring monuments and temples was a huge part of Hatshepsut's reign. Hatshepsut was ambitious with her buildings when she was pharaoh and held a long reign, dying around 1458 BC in her mid-40s. At the end of her reign, after her death, there was an attempt to erase her rule from history. Statues were destroyed, monuments defaced, and her name was removed officially from the king's list. This was done by Thutmose III to create a clean succession from Thutmose I to Thutmose III, without any interruptions from a female leader. Religion is heavily linked in the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. Religion in ancient Egypt was polytheistic, meaning they believed in and worshipped multiple gods. In Egyptian burial, the deceased body went through a process of mummification. The intestines would be removed from the body, and the abdominal cavity would be thoroughly washed out. The only organ kept in the body was the heart, as it was believed to contain the Ab aspect of the soul. The organs would then be preserved in jars and placed in the tomb. They were thought to still be needed by the deceased for their journey. The removal of the organs signified the removal of sin from the body. Afterlife in Egyptian culture was known as the field of reeds, which is thought to depict a perfect reflection of the life we have on earth. The reason for these burials was that Egyptians, if the deceased didn't get a proper burial, they would come back and haunt the living. Every period contained materials and provisions for the afterlife and the journey to removal. Tombs were originally very simple, just graves dug in the dirt, but these advanced and turned into intricate structures that held the coffins or sarcophaguses of the deceased. These coffins were securely constructed for the symbolic and practical protection of the deceased. These tombs were important as the tomb needed to be a permanent resting place for physical form and had to be protected from grave robbers as well as decay and any physical elements. The mortuary temple of Hatshepsut was built to commemorate the achievement of the late queen pharaoh and is where she is buried as a funerary temple. The temple was built in reference to the mortuary temple of Mentuhotep II, who started the Middle Kingdom in Egypt and is considered the legendary king of the first dynasty. Hatshepsut admired Mentuhotep II's temple and planned hers to mirror it, but on a much larger scale. Hatshepsut's temple is situated directly next to Mentuhotep II's temple, to show her mounting power even as a female leader. The temple was not built by slave labor, as many believe, but by Egyptian workers who all built palaces, temples, monuments, raised obelisks, and pyramids as paid workers. The mortuary temple is very intricate. The temple is split into 3 terraces or courtyards, the lower, middle, and upper. This temple was designed by Hatshepsut's steward and confidant Senenit. The scale of the temple is 29.5 meters tall and 273.5 meters wide. The lower terrace is the very front of the temple, also known as the courtyard of the temple. It holds an entrance and the ramp to the middle terrace. There are three distinct areas in the middle terrace, the first being the birth colonnade. The birth colonnade, located on the right of the temple, tells the story of Hatshepsut's divine creation, Amen being her true father. The second area is the chapel of Anubis. The chapel is located at the ramp's left and was built to worship the god of death. The chapel proper is located at the very end of the middle terrace on the left. Aher was also known as the guardian of Der El Bimar. The chapel has multiple columns known as Aher columns. There are depictions of the goddess as well as depictions of anthropomorphic females with cow ears. There is another set of ramps located in the middle of the middle terrace. This leads to the upper terrace. The upper terrace has four sections across it: the upper portico, the upper court, the inner sanctuary, and the sun fault complex. The upper portico is a four-front portico with 2 rows of columns. The external columns depict colossal Osirid statues of the queen, and only a few remain. The sculptures are Osiris with Hatshepsut's face and a beard with the iconic Egyptian curve that signifies divinity. The next area on the upper terrace is the upper court. In its prime, the court contained 2 rows of columns, of which only 2 have been re-erected. At the very back of the upper court is a sanctuary depicted to Amen at the heart of the temple. The following section is the inner sanctuary, where ceremonies took place. The last area on the upper terrace is the sun cult complex, which was a group of rooms, one of which held the sun altar. The sun cult complex mainly worshipped Amun-Re, the sun god. Then these are my sources. Thank you for listening.
Good job. And oh. Deja vu all over. All right, so let me go back one. And I brought another one from last semester, and this is Pulkit's. Yeah, and
hi, my name is Pulkit, and I'm going to present a beautiful creation which is the great scientist which is located in Madhya Pradesh, India. Such one of the oldest stone structures in India built in the modern period. The sculptures, monuments, and lush gardens of Sanchi Stupa have been designated as the World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Sanchi, a small village, is located at the foothill very close to the capital city of Madhya Pradesh. The place attracts wanderers from across the world with its ancient stupas, monasteries, and prosperous Buddhist culture. Sanchi is a Buddhist complex famous for its great stupa on a hilltop at Sanchi town in Raisin district of the state of Madhya Pradesh. It is located about 43 kilometers from Raisin town district headquarters and 46 kilometers northeast of the capital of Madhya Pradesh. The great Sanchi Stupa, the most celebrated of the structures at the historic site of Sanchi. It is one of the oldest Buddhist monuments in the country and the largest stupa at the site. The great stupa was originally built in the 3rd century BCE by the Mauryan emperor Ashoka and is believed to house ashes of the Buddha. The simple structure was damaged at some point during the 2nd century BCE. It was later repaired and enlarged when the elements were added. It reached its final form in the 1st century BCE. The building is 37 meters wide and 17 meters high. The dome-shaped anda with green highlights the portraits of the mound of dirt that was used to cover Lord Buddha's remains. It has a solid core that cannot be entered. The hermika that the red highlights is inspired by a square railing that surrounds the mound of dirt, making it a burial place. The chhatra was procured from the outer wall, placed over the mound to protect it from elements as the symbolic value of Anda expanded over time. The central pillar that holds the umbrella was said to represent the pilot of the universe. The four noble truths are that life is suffering, the cause of suffering is desire. The cause of desire must be overcome. When desire is overcome, there is no motion. Once individuals come to fully understand the four noble truths, they are able to achieve enlightenment or the complete knowledge of the Dharma. Stupas were originally traditional burial mounds for everyday people in ancient India. They had no religious significance. They were simply memorials that were less elaborate and conspicuous than they are today. Buddha's death changed the world. Now, stupas are a place for meditation. They are often used as prayer halls or temples. These have been used for a long time within Buddhism, and they have spread throughout the world to wherever has large Buddhist populations. It's unfair to talk about Buddhism, Sanchi Stupa, and not life story of Buddha. At this time of great potential in Siddhartha Gautama, the future Buddha was born into a royal family. Growing up, the Buddha was exceptionally intelligent and compassionate. Tall, strong, and handsome, the Buddha belonged to the warrior caste. It was predicted that he would become either a great king or spiritual leader. Since his parents wanted a powerful ruler for their kingdom, they tried to prevent Siddhartha from seeing the unsatisfactory nature of the world. They surrounded him with every kind of pleasure. He completely mastered the important combat training, even winning his fight Yasodhara in an archery contest. Suddenly, at age 29, he was confronted with impermanence and suffering. On rare outings from his luxurious place, he saw someone respirate his. The next day, he saw an old man and finally a dead person. He was very upset to realize that old age, sickness, and death would come to everyone he loved. Siddhartha had no refuge to offer them. The next morning, the prince walked past a meditator who sat in deep absorption. When their eyes met and their minds linked, Siddhartha stopped mesmerized. In a flash, he realized that the perfection he had been seeking outside must be within the mind itself. Meeting that man gave the future Buddha a first and enticing taste of mind, a true and lasting refuge which he knew he had to experience himself for the good of all. The Buddha decided he had to leave his royal responsibilities and his family in order to realize full enlightenment. He left the palace secretly and set off alone into the forest, and rest is history.
The Sanchi Stupa was commissioned by Emperor Ashoka of the Maurya dynasty in the 3rd century BC. The Great Stupa at Sanchi is amongst the most critical Buddhist landmarks, reflecting Buddhist art and architecture. Built of bricks in the Mauryan period, it flourished till the 11th century. The expansion of the stupa happened during the Shunga dynasty, which took over the Mauryan dynasty.
Good job, Pulkit. You see, we were in this case dealing with architecture. But I think that all of the questions that I have in here, they were all mostly answered. And there were a lot of nuggets of dispelling myths in both of these presentations. And one that I liked from Emma's was that she pointed out that temple mortuary of Hatshepsut was built by paid workers, not slaves, which we're finding out in this day and age that much of the buildings in Washington were built by slaves, the White House, the US Capitol, and so on. But that is a pretty recent discovery. If you look at old films about Egypt, they always show these slaves and the slave masters building the pyramids and all that. Archaeology reveals truth. And what they found, like outside of the pyramids and a lot of these Egyptian structures, is that there was an encampment right beside the architecture. And this is where the workers lived. They had domiciles for their families. They had a lot of the comforts. They lived actually a pretty middle class lifestyle, or at least middle class for ancient times. But they're finding things like they had breweries and stuff. They drank beer and they got off work just kind of like people I know. So anyway, all of these things here are covered, and I found a couple of others that are from more professional sources. I found this one. I thought this was kind of cool. It does some of the same things. And I wanted to talk to you today about surrealism. Anyway, so I thought, let's play Khan Academy, persistence of memory. Come on. Open. Please. There it is.
Example. Every system.
This is a weird video because
And here, I understand why people kind of connect with now. I mean, anybody who's ever tried to make an album for a rock band is inspired by a sound album result.
so they're talking about this as being a real famous painting, and it ends up on the covers of rock albums and stuff, which is part of the influence and where you can find this. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Also, this kind of fun, what are you looking at? He's really playing with reality. It's kind of a visual brain teaser.
Is that it? Is it on other art? It's this attack on rational and then such a significant.
Yeah, it's fine. It's truly, I think it's the back of fashion. Maybe something really more good. That's 5 cents.
I'll or boosters and one room. And it's interesting. It's really serious. This was surrealism. This was founding the Spanish offices. Just comparing joining us in this story.
I'm assuming significant, essentially do dreamscapes, and then these, as you mentioned, attack on the rational. Yes, kind of this desert scape, ignoring the melting clouds. You feel that, okay, if you were in this landscape, yes, time really does not really carry a lot of weight. You can just kind of wither there and die and care, even that kind of water in the background. There's no waves. It's like they've had time to settle down. There's really no active. There's this unbearable. No. But that is a good. We make that obvious, but eating away at time, that's fascinating.